So, what was 2014's Game of the Year? What was the best game of 2014? The Game of the Year of 2014 is... none. Nothing. None of them. Not a single choice. You know why? Because 2014 sucked as a gaming year. This year, 2014, has been incredibly disappointing. Probably the worst year in gaming that I can remember in the past, ever since I've been gaming, since like the 90s. This has been an incredibly fucking disappointing shit year. I mean, there is no Game of the Year. Certainly not for me. I can't think of a single title. Alright? And the reason I bring this up is, of course, everybody's got their own little end-of-the-year lists, you know, oh, what's the best game of the year? And Gamespot is doing their little poll, you know, what was the best game of 2014? And they basically have this overall game of the year poll, and they poll other systems as well, from the 360 and the PS3 to the PS4 and the Xbox One, the Wii U, all of that. And they're basically doing these polls where you get to vote, you know, there's a vote, basically, whatever choices they give you. And I'm taking a look at the overall Game of the Year choices, and there is nothing here that fucking stands out at all. Nothing in this list I would pick as Game of the Year nominee or Game of the Year choice, I should say. Let's take a look at the list. Bayonetta 2, okay. Bayonetta 2 has an 8% so far. An 8% for Bayo 2. Well, you could argue that Bayonetta 2 was very well received for the Wii U this year. You got like a 90-something% on Metacritic and everything like that. But at the same time, we're talking about a sequel to an old 5-year-old last-gen game. And is this a next-gen experience? Is this an actual worthy game in 2014? A sequel to a game that came out half a decade ago, that essentially has some tweakings here and there, some improvements from the first one, and maybe a little bit better than the first one, but overall still very familiar. Can we say that this is actual Game of the Year? I don't fucking think so. Bayo 2 is it's become infamous now too, with the whole, you know, using the sex to sell and everything regarding the, well, I don't want to get too much into the Gamergate thing, but you know, you can argue that this game relies a lot on its fan service. There's that. And I've never been a big fan of the Bayo storyline anyway. You know, the way that they present the characters, the twisted humor, and the kind of the... I just don't like the humor. I don't really get it. You know, it's really not that entertaining for me. It's all about the gameplay. And even the gameplay, it's nothing special compared to some of the other... I mean, my god, man, compared to other games, other action-adventure titles, and other pseudo, you know, shooting games and third-person shooters, Bayo 2 to me is it's a well-made game that isn't anything special, but people act like it's special because it's on the fucking Wii U, and the Wii U has been lacking mature M-rated games, so it stands out even more on the Wii U, and it has an illusion that it's bigger than it actually is. So Bayonetta 2, I wouldn't fucking pick Bayonetta 2 at all. Bravely Default has a 1%. Bravely Default, fuck off. Child of Light, 0%. Can't believe that has a 0%, but you know what? It's again, these smaller games, right? These indie-style games or small, you know, non-AAA games. You can't even put them in a fucking list like this. It's almost like an insult. It's insulting to include these little fucking games here because they're not big games. They're not AAA games, and not a lot of people have even a remote idea, a remote clue that these games exist. They're very small time, you know, not everybody downloads games. You know, a much smaller percent of gamers that own consoles will play something like a Child of Light or download it or enjoy it. You know, a game like Child of Light would have probably been a contender, a legitimate contender 20 years ago on the 16-bit generation during the, you know, 94 Super Nintendo era, Sega Genesis, that kind of thing. That would have made more sense, but in 2014, something like Child of Light and games like Bravely Default. You got another one, Danganronpa 2, Goodbye Despair. Danganronpa 2, Goodbye Despair. It's got a 0% vote so far, so of course. God damn it. Let's keep moving. Dark Souls 2 has an 8%. Dark Souls 2, are you kidding me? The shittiest Souls game in the Souls series so far. You know, it doesn't have the fucking flair of Demon Souls, the original Demon Souls. It doesn't have the novelty of that game, and I would say Demon Souls is a better game. The first Dark Souls is pretty damn sweet. You know, I enjoy it. And Dark Souls 2 is like the shitty third, you know, installment, or the third iteration of that franchise. It's nothing special. It's fucking Dark Souls 2, the shittiest one in the series. How was that game of the year? It's got an 8% score. Let's keep moving. Destiny has a 3%. Fucking Destiny. The disappointment continues because 2014 is a very disappointing year because of games like Destiny. Destiny did not live up to the hype, that big buzz during the E3 conferences and people making a big stink about it because, well, oh, it's Bungie. Destiny was a piece of fucking, destined piece of trash. Disappointment Destiny, that's what it is. My god, man, Destiny. 3%, it's got a 3%. Divinity Original Sin has a 3%. Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze has 2%. A fucking Donkey Kong Country game on the Wii U has a 2% game. Yeah, that's Game of the Year right there. How the fuck is this Game of the Year? It's a solid enough platformer on a Wii U, but it's nothing outstanding. This is it plays so familiar, these platformers. Donkey Kong Country hasn't really been hot since the fucking 90s. I mean, when Donkey Kong Country came out, the original one for the Super Nintendo, 20 years ago, in like 1994 or some shit like that. I think it was 94, Jesus. I mean, it was a hot game 20 years ago. That was in the 90s. You know what I'm saying? That was way back in the day, back when games like Donkey Kong Country actually had a solid chance of being Game of the Year, because there's a fucking demand for 2D platformers. That was what was available at the time in terms of technology. In terms of technology, that was what was available at the time. Fast forward 20 years later in 2014, in something like Tropical Freeze, which is very, very familiar, very similar to the old school Donkey Kong games, Donkey Kong Country games. No way in hell should it be nominated for Game of the Year all over again. What the fuck is that? That's like, rewarding a really old game. Giving the award to a really old fucking style game. It's ridiculous. This style of gaming has been arguably like dated and outdated, and it's really past its prime. There's way more other experiences out there when it comes to gaming than just a fucking platformer like Tropical Freeze. Fuck. Alright, here we go. Dragon Age Inquisition has a 28%. This one, by a mile, has been nominated as... It's gotta be the runaway top choice for pretty much like every system. I think on the Xbox One and the PS4 choices on those votes. This one is actually at the top of the list, and Inquisition apparently it's got a 28% overall, so that's a pretty high score compared to everything else. It's a Dragon Age game. What's so special about Dragon Age? I think it's boring. I've always found Dragon Age boring. This shit is boring. This RPG bullshit. This thing where tons of dialogue and shit. It's very like Elder Scrolls, Mass Effect-ish, that Mass Effect kind of thing. I mean, it just seems like, just a bunch of fucking nerds getting into this kind of stuff. How is this Game of the Year? We've seen games like this. So I'm not impressed. Inquisition can fuck off, you know what I mean? It's another Skyrim. It's another Skyrim, an overhyped, RPG type of game that isn't anything special. Go talk about Go talk about Dragon Age Inquisition being a dope game 2, 3, 5 years down the road. Nobody's gonna care. Because they're gonna make another game, another Dragon Age game in the future that will either be very similar to this game or will completely eclipse this game, but it's gonna be more of the same shit. And what, everybody's gonna hype up that game too? That game is gonna get fucking hyped up? Inquisition is nothing special. That's the main problem. Dragon Age is one of those overhyped RPG series, and you know where they came. We know, you know, who develops these games. We know where they come from. Everybody's got to hype it up like some sort of like, oh, it's the game of the year. It's the game of the year. It's nothing special. Dragon Age Inquisition is nothing special. The way that you can tell a game is really good, like this game should be game of the year, is if you look back on it like, you know, 10, 20 years later, and then you go like, wow, that game was so fucking amazing. You know, it leaves this lasting impression, a lasting legacy. Something like Dragon Age, it's just another installment in the Dragon Age franchise. I mean, I guess I can't really blame them for picking this game because it's got a 28%, but look at the other choices. The other choices are trash too, so it's like, how can it really be, you know, I guess I can't really fault these people. Far Cry 4 has a 3%. Wow, Far Cry 4 gives a fuck about Far Cry 4, Jesus Christ. It's even shittier than Far Cry 3. It's more of the same as Far Cry 3, but it's like, okay, it's not a big deal. Far Cry 4 is just... It's just another sequel, another installment in the Far Cry games. It's got a 3%, nobody cares. Freedom Wars has a 0%, thank God. Hearthstone, Heroes of Warcraft has a 2%. Warcraft can fuck off. Hitman Go has a 0%. Mario Kart 8 has 1%. Mario Kart 8 has 1%, of course. It's a piece of shit. Another generic kart racing game. Who cares? Mario Kart 8. Oh, well, you know, it's a decent game, and, you know, it's a decent kart racing game. It's more of the same shit. We know what to expect from Mario Kart. The gameplay is pretty much the same as the previous kart racing games. It's nothing special. The battle mode sucks. So, I mean, give a fuck about Mario Kart, man. Game of the year? Hell no. Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes has a 1%. Of course, Metal Gear Solid is way, way past its prime as a franchise. Metal Gear Solid 4 was dope on the PS3. That's a great game. That might have been Game of the Year in 2008. That might have been the Game of the Year, but the Metal Gear Solid 5, Metal Gear Solid V is a piece of shit. It's a cash-in. It's you're trying to milk the Metal Gear Solid name. That's the only reason why they put it out, is to make money off the Metal Gear fucking name. It's not about creating an amazing, compelling story or a great, intricate, complex plot line and these characters. It's nothing but the developer and the publishers trying to make money off Metal Gear and Solid Snake and all that shit. Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor. Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor. I heard that this game was decent. I haven't actually played this game, but I heard it was decent. An 8%. But, I mean, you know, you got these Lord of the Rings games coming out, or these Lord of the Rings franchise type of things, but, I mean, how many people play this game? How many people actually enjoy this and thought this was the best game of the year? You know, Lord of the Rings is not for everybody. So how in the hell can this be Game of the Year? It never got that big of a hype. I don't remember everybody, you know, it didn't really get that much of a hype. Like, it didn't have a huge build-up. It didn't have a huge fanfare before it came out, unlike something like a GTA 5. Like, Grand Theft Auto 5 has a lot of build-up, has a lot of hype, a lot of marketing. Middle-earth Shadow of Mordor, I barely fucking heard about it, so... Monument Valley has a 0%, Ollie Ollie has a 0%, Oh my god. Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. 2%. Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. Yeah, it's called a gimmick. Crossover gimmick. It's no different than Street Fighter Cross Tekken, Marvel vs. Capcom, Mortal Kombat versus DCU, and all these other cross-platform, not cross-franchise type of things. These crossovers. It's no different. It's just a gimmick. I don't care if the game is, oh, the game's really good. The game's really good. But how is this game of the year? Just because two franchises are together? It's got a 2%, so nobody gives a shit. Shovel Knight has a 3%, so Shovel Knight is actually beating Layton versus Ace Attorney. Bunch of hipster trash, man. Hipster fucking games for, these loser hipsters. Jesus. PT has a 1%. I'm shaking my head. PT. South Park: The Stick of Truth has a 3%. A South Park game being named Game of the Year. That's a big joke right there. That's got to be the biggest South Park related joke I've ever heard in years. South Park has never had an amazing game. They'll have certain titles here and there, but they're nothing. It's a TV show that happens to have a video game that was based on the show, and that's it. You're not getting the best of South Park. The best of South Park is the greatest seasons on TV. That's the best South Park, not a fucking game that tries to be like the TV show. Super Smash Bros for Nintendo 3DS, you gotta be fucking joking me. It's got a 1%. Give me a break. These Nintendrones make me laugh. These fucking idiots that love Nintendo. Oh my god. Desperate, pathetic Nintendo fanboys. I've never seen anything more pathetic than these idiotic Nintendo fanboys. The worst. The most desperate. Smash Bros for the Wii U, it has a 7%, so at least the Wii U version has significantly more votes than the 3DS version, but even Smash Bros on the Wii U, nowhere near in hell is this game a fucking Game of the Year 2014. Not even close. You want to talk about familiar territory? This game is familiar territory. It's more of the same Smash Bros shit we've seen since 1999. Jesus Christ. Smash Bros. Fuck you. Super Time Force has a 0%. Last of Us Left Behind has a 3%. A ridiculous rehash. Last of Us, give me a fucking break. The Vanishing of Ethan Carter has a 2%. The Wolf Among Us has a 3%. Another joke of a game. Theater Rhythm Final Fantasy Curtain Call. You gotta be kidding me with that one. Nobody played it. 0%. Threes has a 1%. Titanfall has 6%. Titanfall would have been Game of the Year if it lived up to the hype, but again, it was kind of disappointing in that people just... It didn't have longevity, and it wasn't exactly the greatest game of the year or anything like that. I mean, it's enjoyable as an Xbox One exclusive, and I will always, I'll always promote Titanfall as a relatively decent game to kind of, want to get an Xbox One for, but at the same time, it's nothing outstanding. It's not this like highly impressive game that completely shattered everybody's, expectations. Transistor has a 3%, and then finally Velocity 2X has a 0. Transistor has a 3%. Velocity 2X has a 0%. 2014, one of the shittiest, if not the shittiest year in gaming history. There is no Game of the Year. There is no Game of the Year. Everything was disappointing. Everything was a fail, and everything fucking flopped. It was not an impressive year in gaming, and I really don't have high hopes for next year either. And it was so much better back then. It's amazing taking a look at gaming, not even like that long ago. Let's say 2008, 2009, something like 2009 had some really good fucking games. 09, 2008, those years were so much better. That 7th generation was so much more exciting, you know. It had way better choices as like Game of the Year, actual Game of the Year caliber nominees. This year has been terrible. Abysmal. What a horrible state that gaming has become. We have the Xbox One and the PS4, and even the Wii U, and there's nothing that is so outstanding in those fucking systems that I would even consider Game of the Year. Last year, in 2013, I mean, even something like GTA 5 that's a pretty good game. You know what I'm saying? I give that game a solid thumbs up. I don't know if that was Game of the Year, but I mean, put it this way. GTA 5 was better than anything that came out this year. And that's pretty sad. That's pretty sad. Because GTA 5 felt like your typical Grand Theft Auto game. You know, it was basically GTA 4 except with a slightly bigger map and better looking graphics, and that was pretty much it.